Hi, American Johnson, non-compete, that's the channel you're watching. This is another unscripted video. The kind of video that I know you don't like because you don't watch them. But that's okay, because some of you will, and that's who this video is for the people who are going to watch it. Today we're going to be talking about the stuff that's been going on. You know, the decades and decades of events that have been compressed into the last 3 or 4 months. Can you believe that it's only been about 4 months since... less than that, 3 months since COVID-19 broke out all over the world. And it's only been about 2 weeks since the massive uprisings have broken out across the USA and now spread to other countries like the United Kingdom and Australia and like every other country almost. Time sure does slow down when you're terrified every moment that things are going to just spiral out of control, but you're also kind of hopeful because this is the first time we've had such a massive wave of revolutionary activity in decades. That's what I always say. So I've had some realizations and some revelations, and I've been trying to process them this week. I did write a script, by the way. It's on police abolition, but it was a monster of a script, and it requires a lot more editing, and I didn't really want to rush it, so hopefully next week that video will come out. But anyway, this week we're going to talk about some of these things that I've just been kind of, I guess I've been having some breakthroughs, and I've been trying to process things into my theory brain and my investigation senses and my praxis hands. And I'm going to share those things with you now. The most important thing I think that I have noticed recently is that, wow, did the left kind of not see this coming, or at least not the left that I'm involved with, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, I mean, Black Red Guard did a video recently. I think everyone should watch it. I'm going to talk about Black Red Guard quite a bit in this video, but Black Red Guard did a video where, you know, he was talking about the fact that the left, as we consider ourselves, was just really fell behind and did not see this coming and did not really play a part in the, and I'm speaking specifically about the protests. I think most of us just got completely blindsided, especially white folks like me. And that's a big part of what I'm going to be talking about, is just the fact that we've been a little bit out of touch. And I know I've personally been very out of touch with a lot of stuff that's been going on. I have always tried to highlight and seek counsel from people from a variety of backgrounds. You know, we've done the Micro International, haven't done it in a while, but we did used to, every week almost interview people from around the world to get their perspective on, the emerging new state of politics. That's how I met a lot of comrades who I still keep in touch with from Brazil, Israel, Austria, all around the world. So having conversations with people who have a different perspective and different insights into different segments of the populations of the world, I think is very important. And it's something that we really haven't done enough of. I did a video over a year ago now, maybe close to 2 years now, on dialectical materialism. But in that video, I talked about how one of the most important jobs of the left right now is to try to break down the fracturing and the divisions of the working class, specifically things like gender and sexuality. And of course, as we're all seeing lately, there are a lot of fractures when it comes to race. And this is something that I almost feel kind of ashamed of, is the fact that I haven't been more clued in with the Black community. And when these protests started up, I was surprised, and I didn't really see it coming. And I think, I should have seen it coming, because when I go and look at some of the Black radical activists who, I just started following recently, or when I check in with folks like Black Red Guard, who I haven't checked in with for a while, you start to realize that, yeah, there has been a lot of movement in the Black community in the USA, especially for a long time, that kind of led up to this. It wasn't really as spontaneous as it seemed to me, a white guy who lives in Vietnam. There has been, a lot of momentum and a lot of anger and a lot of theorizing and planning as far as ending police brutality. And I think that's really exemplified by this push to defund the police that we're seeing come from the left and left-adjacent radical Black activist community. So I've considered myself to be a police abolitionist for years now and a prison abolitionist. And I've read plenty of, books and articles and those sorts of things about police abolition, but it's all kind of out of date. And I didn't even realize that. But there has been this, major concerted, organized effort in the Black community to defund the police that's kind of been building hand in hand with the Black Lives Matter movement. And it actually, like, they were talking about this a lot during Ferguson back in 2014, and I just didn't even know about any of it because I haven't been as connected as I probably should be to paying attention to and listening to voices from the Black community. Basically, I've done what I can, but not enough to listen to Black voices. And that goes for Indigenous voices as well. That goes for, all people of color. I have done some things to try to platform people of color and Black people in particular, but I have not done nearly enough, and I certainly haven't done enough to listen and learn from the voices from these segments of society. So that's something I've been trying to catch up on, and I've discovered a lot of amazing Black activists on Twitter. I've been trying to catch up on Black content creators on Twitch and YouTube, and there's just so much to catch up on. There are these movements that have been going on kind of like in parallel with our kind of white dominated YouTube and Twitch community or ecosystem, or what do you want to call it. But there hasn't been as much crossover as I'd like. And I've always felt that way. I've always wanted to have more contact. But one thing I've realized is that, if we're trying to build trust with people who don't look exactly like us, right? If we're trying to build trust with Black activists, if we're trying to support the Black Lives Matter movement, and I believe that right now, especially as a white activist, my role is to support the Black Lives Matter movement as it pertains to these protests and as it pertains to signal boosting Black voices. I don't think it's the time or the place right now for white people like me to step up and try to take leadership. I think it's time for us to listen, learn, process, and it's something that I'm kind of frankly ashamed that we haven't done more of, because there's some radical stuff that they've had brewing for a long time. So when the 8 to Abolition campaign or vision first launched, it's like hashtag 8 to Abolition on Twitter, or you can go to 8toabolition.com to look at it. I was blown away because they have this whole well-defined vision for how to abolish the police very quickly. And it's kind of reasonable, and it's picked up so much momentum. I can tell you that if you would have asked me about a year ago, I would have said that abolishing the police would be one of the least likely platform points for us to be trying to push right now within the liberal capitalist system. But there's so much appetite for it, and the appetite is growing so fast. And the reason I didn't know that is because I have mostly been plugged into white folks and middle class people and people who don't. I mean, I've been harassed by the police plenty. I'm from South Carolina. I come from a town called Goose Creek that has one of the highest police to citizen ratios in the world. So I've been harassed by the police, but it's definitely not on the same level as a Black person or a person of color. Somebody who's grown up literally, in fear of losing their life to the police. I've been harassed. I've gotten bullshit speeding tickets and that sort of thing. I've gotten frisked, for no reason, but it's not the same thing. I've never really felt like my life was threatened by the police. And so because I haven't had that, intimate connection to those communities, I didn't even, realize that there was this huge appetite in a lot of corners of the United States to defund and abolish the police. And, speaking of defunding, I had never even heard the word defund before these protests started. And I feel like that's something that I should have heard of because, I'm a professional leftist activist YouTuber. And, I spend all day, every day researching and reading and talking to other leftists. And nobody's ever mentioned this defund thing to me. And I don't know, maybe maybe I just missed, maybe it was all over the place and I just missed it, but I don't get the impression. I feel like this is something that I missed out on because I wasn't plugged into enough Black content creators and enough Black activists on social media. I wasn't really clued into that community. So what can I do to improve that? Well, I've already followed a lot of people and started to consume a lot more media from those spaces. Another thing I'm starting to realize is that it's not necessarily a situation where I'm going to be able to go in and have conversations with a lot of these people. That's always been my strategy for learning about things that I don't know a lot about. Like, for instance, I didn't know much about Israel, so I talked to somebody from Israel, had them on the show. I would love to have more Black activists come on my show, on live streams and that sort of thing. And if you are a Black content creator or a Black activist or a writer or anything like that, you are always welcome to come onto my show. Get in touch with me. You can email me. But the fact of the matter is, I know that especially right now in this moment, a lot of these Black activists are very busy and they don't have time to come, talk to some mid-tier, under 100,000 sub white ass YouTuber, and that's fine. So what I need to do is just really seek out this information and then try to signal boost it and do my best to support that community. So I'll put some links in the description to a lot of Black content creators. A lot of those I sourced from Thought Slime's recent video eyeballs on Black content creators. So you can check that if you'd like to see more. Also some good Twitter accounts. So yeah, follow, and not just follow, but support these people. A lot of them have, Venmos or Patreons or that sort of thing. So make sure that you, if it's at all possible, to financially support these Black radical activists. They're very, very busy right now. They're very stressed. They have a lot going on, and they shouldn't be having to worry so much about like paying for their groceries and their rent and that sort of thing right now. So if we can support them as a community, let's try to do that. One thing I can tell you from working with Luna, my partner on this channel, who also has her own YouTube channel, Luna Oi, and she does Twitch streams as well, is the struggle that she's had to go through as a person of color on this platform. I'm not as intimately familiar with the problems that Black people have on these platforms, but just from working with Luna, I can tell you that she has had a lot of issues with the fact that YouTube and Twitch are very white-dominated platforms. And she's had issues with struggling to grow and struggling with her audience, that I haven't had to ever go through. So like, for instance, I never had to deal with racist comments coming at me, and Luna's been targeted by racists and by Nazis and that sort of thing just for simply not being white. She's had people make a lot of shitty gestures about her accent. She's got a Vietnamese accent. And also just the fact that people just haven't seemed as interested in her channel. And by people, I mean, mostly white people, like my audience. And I'm not shaming anybody or anything like that. Like that, people can watch whatever they want to watch. But I've just noticed that, like, compared to the quality of her content, I think her content from the very first video she ever did has been amazingly good, but she's not seen the level of growth that I think a white person with that same quality content would be having. And she's only really started to get traction with her channel in the last couple of months since she started to find an audience with people of color around the world. So the audience that Luna is really discovering, and the audience that's discovering her, are people in Brazil and people in Indonesia and people in the Philippines, okay? And the Vietnamese community, like the Vietnamese diaspora all around the world, they're starting to pay attention and listen to Luna. But I still don't see a lot of growth with white people with her channel. And I mean, I think there's just resistance to people, and there's all kinds of probably psychological and sociological and algorithmic reasons why this happens, but people tend to watch white people tend to watch white channels more. I think that's safe to say. I don't think that the algorithm does any favors for people of color on this platform. It's probably not like nefariously designed by YouTube and Twitch, but just because of the patterns of behavior and the patterns of watching, I think it's a lot harder. And I'm saying this from watching Luna with her experience with her channel. I think it's a lot harder for them to get traction. So we need to go out of our way to support these creators, and not in a way that's like tokenizing them, but I mean, we need to understand that they, people of color and Black people and indigenous people, they have a lot of experience dealing with oppression and knowing how to fight oppression that I, as a white person, do not have. There's a lot of wisdom and experience that we're going to get from listening to people of color, indigenous people, just trying to do everything we can to listen to what they're saying, signal boost what they're saying. I think it's really, really going to be very important moving forward. I think that it's amazing that the Black community has gotten so far in just a couple of weeks in terms of pushing these radical platform points that I thought were just well out of reach to have public discourse about. The mainstream media is not going to do any favors for this movement. They're not going to platform radical Black activists as much as we desperately need them to. They're not going to be covering the protests, especially the peaceful aspects of the protest. They're really only going to turn it into a spectacle. I've done my video on that. the way that the press manipulates things. So we have to do what we can to signal boost these creators, these ideas to our white friends and family. I have tried to do things like write Medium articles, make Facebook posts, make videos to push out to my white friends and family in my personal life. I think that's something we all really need to be doing right now. I think if everybody shared this 8toabolition.com website and shared the experiences that Black people are having with our white friends and family, that's the only way we're going to spread these messages in any kind of a positive light. Because if our parents and our cousins and our friends and our coworkers are only getting their news from CNN and Fox News and their local TV stations, they're just not going to get our side of the story or the Black perspective. It's going to be filtered through this kind of neoliberal, anti-radical, anti-revolutionary perspective. We're going to be hearing from a lot of liberal milquetoast voices, like Joe Biden, who has responded to the idea of defunding the police with giving them $300 million more dollars, and is now seriously vetting a police officer, Kamala Harris, as a vice president pick. So, electoralism is not going to solve these problems or do anything to push this agenda to defund and abolish the police. The media is not going to help us. We have to do it ourselves. We have to take this bull by the horns and push out those radical Black voices. And that means we got to listen to them first, and then, be able to articulate and share those voices to our friends and family. And it's very, very important that we do that. And now is a time right now where a lot of white people, especially white liberals, are actually receptive and they're actually paying attention. I made a couple of personal Facebook posts that have actually gotten a few of my white friends to recognize for the first time that systemic racism exists. So people are primed right now for this messaging. It's a good time for us all to be supporting Black creators and Black activists and Black writers who are kind of on the cutting edge of radical politics right now. Think about how amazing it'll be if we can abolish the police. I mean, even in just a couple of major cities, even if we could just make it happen in like Minneapolis and maybe Seattle, or maybe just like a couple of major cities to show that we don't need this violent, reactionary, oppressive, authoritarian force that is rooted in slave catching and busting up labor movements. We don't need this kind of a police force. We can abolish them and our communities will be safer and more productive and more healthy. Imagine how amazing it will be if that happens. And if it does happen, it will all be thanks to this radical Black community that has been plugging away at this for years, but flying under the radar of people like me and perhaps like you. So let's do better to listen, folks. Let's do better to lift each other up, and let's accept the guidance of people who really know what they're doing right now. And let's have a little humility and know when it's time to listen. And I think this is one of those times. I'm American Johnson. This is Non-Compete. I thank you very much for watching, and I hope you'll check the links in the description of this video for a lot of Black creators and Black voices that we should be paying attention to right now. Take care of each other.